point where I'm going to hand over to Brendan, who will introduce himself and Public World and what we're about, and also Sam. So, Brendan, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, I'm Brendan Martin. I'm founder of Public World, which is a social enterprise that works for relational public services, as the vernacular has it these days. But what we mean by that is services that develop stronger relationships between the professionals who work in them and the people that they serve, both at individual level and in communities, and especially neighborhoods for local services. This grew out of many years of work internationally, starting with the proposition of how can enabling professionals in public service organizations to work with higher levels of freedom and responsibility, how can that enable them to enjoy their work more, to do a better job and make better relationships with the people they serve, and as a consequence of that, use the resources, which of course are always scarce in public services, more effectively and efficiently. In fact, it grew out of work I did back in the 80s, 1980s, that is, around privatization of public services when I worked for a union. And my responsibility with that union was to guide the union's response to the wholesale privatization of public services that was taking place in Britain at that time. And it led to me writing a book called In the Public Interest about the experience of privatization of public services internationally. And I became very interested in actually how many places and organizations were finding alternative approaches to improving public service performance based on better relationships and on enabling and supporting their people to work with higher levels of freedom and responsibility. So in the last, roughly 10 or so, a little less than 10 years or so ago, no, actually, oh God, in 2010, a bit more than 10 years, isn't it? We were by then developing a number of projects to bring what we had learned internationally over many years into organizational development projects, particularly in Britain. And we began to take an interest, partly as a consequence of my own personal experience of looking after my mum towards the end of her life, in the way in which local care at home services functioned. And this led us to research a little bit about how the principles that we'd been developing around self-organized teamwork to enable people to work together with higher levels of freedom and responsibility, how that could contribute to improving home care services. And I looked around internationally for examples of that and found Buurtzorg in the Netherlands in particular. It so happened that we were just then beginning a new project with a large NHS organization, the Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust in South London. And so I asked Buurtzorg to get involved with that project with us, which they did. And this led to a partnership with Buurtzorg, through which we have worked with 40 or so different organizations in health and care and other public service areas since around 2015, drawing upon not only what we're learning from Buurtzorg, but also drawing upon the whole body of knowledge that we had developed since then, but in particular, drawing on the body of knowledge that we have developed as a consequence of working with a growing number of organizations in Britain itself. And one of those has been Newtide Homes. Most of the work that we did over that period was in health and care, but we began to get some interest from social housing organizations. And in our conversation with Sam, I think we'll find out a bit about why. And the first social housing organization we worked with actually was Newtide Homes, where we helped Sam and his leadership team learn about the principles and practices of self-organized teamwork. And we worked also directly with one of their, as it were, frontline teams, in this case called the easy to contact team, easy for the customers of Newtide to contact, that is. And working with both of those teams, we supported this journey that Newtide Homes has been on, to change the way in which it's worked, with some very promising, and indeed in some respects dramatic results in terms of improvements of performance. So that's me and my background, and a bit about what Public World does. But I'd like to move on straight away now to talk to Sam. And firstly, Sam, many thanks for joining us today. And the first question I'd like to ask you is if you could just tell us a little bit about Newtide Homes, and yourself, a little bit about yourself and your own professional background and interests, and what led you to take an interest in the work that we do, but also a little bit about Newtide Homes itself and what you do and your ethos and so on.
Yeah, well, thank you, and it's great to see everyone today. Thanks for your time. I think as always with any of this stuff, it's always quite helpful for some disclaimers first of all. It actually sounds like most people here may already be further on the journey, may have other experiences of different organisations. So I always feel fairly humble, I suppose, when it comes to presenting on this kind of stuff, because I think a lot of you may be further on. It's also important to say, and we'll get into this bit as well, but when I touch on the way we work, but we certainly aren't pure self-management. This isn't holocracy, this isn't Björt's org. I think what we did, and this is why it worked so well for us, is we're a legacy organization, right? So we were born or created in sort of 89. So basically when the internet was created. So we're full of like what we would call organizational debt, right? So processes, policies, people, ways of working that stretch back to years and years and years ago. So we've inherited all of that. So one rule becomes two, one policy becomes three, etc., etc. So we had to unpick a lot of stuff. So I think our journey and the way of doing this and the way we worked with Public World was certainly more around what works for us, not just kind of a lift and shift. So I think that's really important to say at the start. But my journey and a bit about Flagship, and Newtide. So Flagship Group, we're a social housing provider in the east of England. So we have about 30,000 homes, turnover of about 250 million a year. 250, yeah. Our income comes mainly from social rent, so from providing homes for people that can't normally afford to buy or rent a house on the market. We took the decision in about 2018-19 that with 30,000 homes with about 1,500 staff, we've got our own repairs company, gas company, so we like insourcing and doing things ourselves, but that providing that en masse with a whole load of different stakeholders was a bit cumbersome. So we split the organization into three, effectively, one of which is Newtide. So Newtide was created and born in March 2020, which is great timing, as I'm sure everyone will remember. But we have about 10,000 homes. I look after about 250 staff. And for clarity in my remit, I have kind of three main teams. So a housing team, so that's moving people in and out, taking the rent, dealing with any kind of issues there. A neighbourhoods team. And interestingly, Neil, I think I saw Katie Kelly talk a while ago from East Ayrshire. I'm not sure if she's there or not, but some of our inspiration for the neighbourhoods work, funnily enough, has come from East Ayrshire. So that neighbourhoods team is looking after our open spaces, right? From cleaning to mowing to removing graffiti to fly tipping, that kind of stuff. And I've also got a small team of what we call safe communities officers. So they're people that deal with ASB and some specific domestic abuse advisors, which we put in place about a couple of years ago, which is I'm really proud of. So that's a bit about the organisation. So my journey, I've been within this organisation probably now for about 12, 13 years. I started straight from university, working with the chief exec, different jobs every 18 months. I had a lot of freedom. So I think organically that, you know, I was never told what to do. I was always given space. I came across this stuff in about 2014 when I saw Josta Block talk. And it blew my mind because I was just, I'm sure everyone on this call knows, I was just like, wow, that is bonkers. You know, what an incredible way to work. You know, you've got, you know, people want to come to work and enjoy the job. So jackpot for staff. It's great for tenants because they get a much more personalized, you know, a focused service, the whole, you know, first coffee, then care. And then it's a jackpot for the business because it makes financial sense because your overheads are lower. So it really, really intrigued me. But the problem was at that point, I was kind of fairly junior in the organization. I had no control, so or limited control. So when I got this job in, as I say, in March 2020, when the organization was created and I got the job, I was like, right, okay, we can do something now, which is when we started working with Brendan and Rachel to pilot, you know, the kind of a self-managing team.
Thank you, Sam. That's really useful. And one of the things that struck me about what you said was how you haven't worked with us to lift and shift. You were inspired by Josta Blog. I don't know what particular event that was that you took part in. We also started working with Buurtzorg and with Jos in, I think it was 2014, and the work with Guy's and St Thomas's began in 2015. And as I said, we worked with, I mean, our role basically is to provide learning and development support to organizations wanting to learn about self-organized teamwork, and particularly wanting to learn about how it serves the kinds of public service relationships that are needed to enable the if you like, the co-creation of solutions between professionals and the people they serve. Very much along the lines, actually, of as you said, what Katie Kelly has been working to do in East Ayrshire, and now is leading with the new local organisation in Britain. And you also mentioned how you it was important for you not to just do lift and shift. And we were very proud to be the partner of Buurtzorg in Britain and Ireland from around 2015 onwards. But one thing we found about that was that because we were trading as Buurtzorg Britain and Ireland at that time, and I think we probably were trading as Buurtzorg Britain and Ireland, and we began our relationship with you, Sam, although I can't quite remember. One of the downsides of that is it does invite, on the part of the publicly, the idea that what you're trying to do is take a model that's been successful somewhere else and plonk it into different environments, different national environments, different service environments, and different institutional environments. Whereas what we're actually about is going back to the basic principles and purpose of each organization, supporting each organization to think about, why are we here? What are our principles? What do we want to achieve for our staff, for our customers, and as an organization? And how can some of these principles and practices that have been successful elsewhere support us in doing that? And what kind of practices will we develop that perhaps are themselves innovative through drawing on that body of knowledge? And that's one of the reasons, actually, we no longer trade as Buurtzorg Britain and Ireland, because we don't want to send that signal that we're about taking a model from somewhere and putting it somewhere else. It's about each organization finding its own solutions. So going back to you, Sam, what has been your experience? As I said in the introduction, we worked with you to support the learning of your leadership team about how to make this change in an organization, and how to support your frontline teams, in your case, the easy to contact team, to work with greater freedom and responsibility, but within a framework of standards that you will sign up to.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things to say on that, really broadly. And I actually think, it'd be interesting to get, as we move on to, I'm sure people will have questions, etc., as we go. So specifically when we work with you, I think our experience, you know, well, I mean, it was terrific. But the real focus on that showed us was on this framework, right? That was the most important part of the whole pilot. And some of the work, you know, we, you know, talking about self-managing teams, it's theoretical, it's you know, some of it is, it sounds appealing because it gives people, you know, people are kind of instantly bought in because, you know, it's about, you know, working in a way that suits you, right? And again, culturally, I think we were fairly, again, I'd be interested to hear where everyone else is on their journey with their organizations, but fairly progressed, so agile, you know, we don't have annual leave policies, and so there was, we were fairly familiar with quite a supportive and a free way of working anyway, right? So this wasn't a mega leap for us. But when we got down to the nuts and bolts, I think I remember this, that the time taken to really flesh out, okay, this team, what are you responsible for, taught us two things. Firstly, it really put an emphasis on responsibility. Okay, this is the gig. And one of the best and most hilarious questions we got instantly when we said, look, for example, when this easy to contact us, you know, your part of your job is about getting the income. One of the best bit, you know, someone put their hand up, and it's great they put their hand up, by the way, they felt they could ask this, was, well, I need a pay rise. I've got more responsibility. And we were able to say, well, no, this has always been part of your, you know, job description. It's, you know, we could show stuff, you know, historically that sat with HR. But it was a wonderful opportunity to open up these conversations about what is the role, what are you responsible for? And it became clear actually that this takes a huge amount of discipline to do. And it took the, and you know, I think hours for us to work out that framework within which people were working in, you know, and by framework I mean, so what, you know, linked to our organizational purpose, how do we want to work? So, you know, focus on demand, being data led, and then what, you know, what does a regulator, what's the kind of the tax we pay around regulatory and compliance work? So fleshing out that, and what that enabled us to do is to think, okay, we need to take that approach with all of our teams, all of the sub teams in Newtide, the ways of working. So it was enable us to roll out almost a one pager that we've got, that people can refer to say, you know, this is your role, this is where you fit in. And I think it prompted, on the back of that, we had when we first launched, we were doing team meetings, so catch-ups, just to talk about performance, and it was, you know, people were a bit maybe nervous. I know, I'm sure Amy can pitch in with some of this stuff as well, although I think she joined a little bit later than that. But some people were a bit nervous, apprehensive about presenting, because we're asking the teams to present, right? This isn't a management thing, this was the teams. But now when we have team meetings, people are involved, they're, you know, people are presenting their own data, they're presenting on behalf of their team. It isn't something that our coaches or managers do. Sometimes I will, that's also okay because it's their turn, but it's a really open space. So I suppose what I want to say there is, in a nutshell, it's discipline, right? And I think for us, we're going slowly, and this is why it's not a pure thing, because a lot of people, a lot of our team, the great thing about Newtide and Flagship is that people have been around here for a long time. That's also means that's an entrenched way of working, right? And a psyche around being told what to do or working in a particular way. So it's taking us time to you know, free people from that. I think the other thing to say that I've used in and we've kind of done 3 transformations at work. So and this was inspired, yeah, absolutely, by the work that you guys kicked off in Newtide. We did the housing work, then we looked at our complaints team and totally restructured that. I'll talk about some of that in a second, and also our neighbourhoods team. And there are some really simple, points that we took on that again sound so obvious. And when I say it out loud, it does sound a bit almost, you know, super obvious. But the first thing was, it's kind of this macro micro thing, right? So first of all, it's so important to have a vision. So at Newtide, we were really clear that we needed to have a vision, and we called it Housing's Human, to make it really super obvious that actually our business, what we do is about people, right? So don't forget that. So everything comes back to the person, relates to that. We also then, so that's the you know, the macro, again with data. So there was a real impetus on not obviously not no KPIs or targets. That's not important, but having really clear, accessible data. So we've got dashboards set up. So at any point I can drop in on a daily basis and see how the team are doing. And that means that people aren't having to fill stuff out. This stuff organically happens, so that actually we can see how the team are doing, and we can measure and we can track and we can see long-term progress. That's the macro stuff, the vision, the data. The other thing that we found worked terrifically well is again, it sounds so obvious, just having a one-to-one with everyone. So in all of my teams, so I've got the team spans about 250. So with Newtide, it took a while. I sat down, just had a one-to-one with everyone. And the whole point of that is you get a feel, right? You get a feel for the team, you get a feel for how things are going. It's visible leadership, so it shows that we care. You know, you're breaking down the barriers of, you know, I'm too important for that, or I've got management stuff to do, which is just a load of nonsense. It's actually talking to people, because they're the people that do the job. But understanding what's good and what's bad, right? And that's the biggest thing, and getting that out of people, so it builds trust. So the whole point is talking to people on a regular basis, building trust, so that actually you get the truth. You don't get this kind of veneer of what's happening. You actually find out what's going on, and that was brilliant. And what I think we missed, because obviously I inherited some of these teams, some of the teams came into us, is and what's so important is sweating the small stuff, right? Because, and I'll go into the detail in a second of what people said, but so often it's you know, people get consumed by the finances or by the big picture or by a strategy document or whatever. But actually, for people that do the job, you know, the small things actually really make a difference, because it's stuff they have to go and put up with on a daily basis. And they're the people that deliver for our customers. So, you know, the most sensible thing we did was just to spend time and listen and unpick that and sort it out. So with our housing teams, they basically said one of the biggest things was pay. They didn't think they were getting paid a fair market rent, market wage. So we looked into it, and they were absolutely spot on. It cost us about £500,000, but we did that straight away. So we basically paid them a fair whack. Systems, they were saying that their systems were rubbish, didn't have iPads, etc., like, or you know, a decent equipment. So we made sure they had decent equipment. The principle of just not being listened to, feeling unheard, feeling unimportant in the organisation, and again, just by regularly spending time with them, that has dissipated. And again, I think it was in the flyer you sent out, but what that's resulted in now is by listening to that team, paying them actually a fair wage, but also putting in place things to make their job easier. We've now got the highest staff satisfaction in the group, and we've had that 2 or 3 years running now, because it markedly so. Because people are open, they can challenge, they can call me. There's no, you know, this principle of hierarchy is removed. Whilst we operate in a traditional organisation, right? And that's what I'm saying. I'm making no apologies for that. We're historic. We can't do this overnight. But within our team, we're able to, you know, people are able to go and talk to whoever they need to get stuff done. They're listened to, and that's really important. That's really important. With our neighbourhoods team, we did the same. We met with every single person. We only got that team about 6 months ago. I was desperate to have it because it made total sense for it to be with our customer-facing staff. And again, they'd never seen almost any management. It was the first time some of them had actually spoken to people and been listened to, which is absolute madness. So we had, you know, things like sick pay. They didn't have sick pay. And I was like, well, do your managers have sick pay? And they were like, yeah, no, they do. What is that about? So we gave, we instituted sick pay, which was brilliant, because it then meant that the unions got hold of it and could introduce it into our repairs team. So all of our repairs team, now it's about 400 operatives now, also get sick pay. Mega. But little things, right? So they were saying to us, you know, we're saying what's good, what's good, what needs to improve. Some of the comments were about, you know, the types of equipment they use. They don't have a say. It's just bought by procurement. So again, now we've chopped that and said, look, any kind of time we need a renewal, we have to phase it, obviously, because we can't, you know, value for money, etc. But any point, new mowers, whatever, we'll test it with the team. It's their decision. It's not, I don't have to sit on a mower. They do. It's ludicrous. They had, they were saying that people in offices get free fruit and coffee. Why don't we? We're in the vans. Great point. So we looked at what that costs, and we've given them that as a monthly subsidiary. They've got these hilarious phones. This is now legendary in the business. It's a perfect example of this. It's called a cat phone, right? Sorry if this is going into too much detail, by the way, but this is a great one. It's basically a phone that we gave them. Okay, and I think this articulates the patronizing state of UK management. It was a Caterpillar, so the company that make phones, and it was basically a phone that you could basically drive over and not break. It couldn't connect to the internet. You couldn't get any maps on it or anything like that, but it was indestructible. And what we're saying is, we don't trust you. You're Neanderthals. Here's some crap equipment. Bonkers. And the best thing was they've got a camera on it, and someone said, yeah, it's really great because I can take a picture, but I can't send it to anyone. It's like, okay. So we got them out, and at the last team meeting, I chucked one on the floor and was like stamping on it to try and smash it up to make, you know, visible display of, you know, they've all gone. We've given them actual smartphones that work. So when they're on site, they can look at the maps, know their site, see where they're going. It's just bonkers. But again, it just goes back to that point that they have the ideas. This is not me. My role is to listen and unlock, right? I'm bringing nothing new to the party. I don't know how to operate machinery or whatever that, but my role is to unlock it and listen. That's really it. And then our complaints team, we had a complaints team, again, that was, I think we had 6 people dealing with complaints in the organisation. We listened. We met with everyone. The views were the culture was crap. Again, they felt unheard. They had to get sign off for compensation. So if somebody wasn't happy, we could give them compensation. But this is what was mad when you looked at the data. Their limit, so our team's limit was £100, but the average compensation amount was £800. So we're thinking, well, what a waste of time. Actually, so we changed the limits, got that removed, so people could effectively just give compensation, trust people to do the job. And again, in all of these teams, so the other overriding thing that we did in Newtide, that we did in the neighbourhoods team and in the complaints team, is remove management, because we found that there was just at least one layer of tripe that just did work about work and had no impact on the team, which inevitably led to savings. So with the housing team, we removed a layer that was about, I don't know, 50k. In the complaints team, like I said, there were 6 people that did. There was also like a head of service and a director. They're no longer in the business, so we now have a team of 15 people that actually do the job. In the neighbourhoods team, we had this strange kind of, it was called a lead operative. So somebody that would kind of not do the job or lead in a way. It was a very curious thing that no one really knew what they did. When you spoke to people again, no one really knew what they did. So that went, so we could instantly give 6 more people to actually support with the demand when people were saying, this season's been crazy, the grass has been a nightmare to cut. So we saved about 80k there, 80k in the complaints team, and the housing team about 50k. And the other thing to say in all of this, and I talked about at the start about the kind of vision, and I'll use neighbourhoods as the example for this. The vision always links to how we want to work. So in the neighbourhoods team, we're really clear that what we're trying to get to now is not a position where you're told what to do, and you because traditionally they have got a schedule of work that they'll go out and there'll be a patch of grass. They'll look at their phone and it'll tell them they've got to go to that site and mow it, move on. We totally chucked that on its head, and this is some of the kind of, I hope, the East Ayrshire stuff that they're still doing. But we were like, look, we want you to think, right? Actually look, think, and invest in our neighbourhoods, places. So what we've done is effectively removed that way of working and made it more outcome focused. So when people they're responsible for a site, it's on them. They have to visit maybe once a month. They record it again, so we'll have the data, but we're not telling them when to do it. And go to site and use your initiative. Do what you need to do. Plant some hedgerows. Go and talk to some tenants. It doesn't have to be just doing. It's that principle about thinking. Yeah. So in a nutshell, it's effectively predominantly about the discipline of the approach, about being really clear what people have to do and being clear with them on that. Actually, folk taking responsibility. So we have much less demand on our coaches now. So we need fewer of them as well. So we've got about, I think in Newtide, we've got about 4 coaches for a team of about 50 people. Again, that's not pure self-management, but again, it's less demand because people are meeting themselves. They're thinking of solutions themselves. Save money by saving time. Obviously, if you assign offs, one-to-ones, we kind of binned. There are catch-ups, obviously, but that some of the feedback initially was that people just had diarised one-to-ones every month, which is a bit ludicrous. And again, the approach has saved us money by reducing debt. So because we've unleashed our income team, we've seen our debt just decrease year on year on year. So we used to have, I think our rental debt was about 4%, which is about £1.5 million, and it's now about £900,000, I think, or about £1 million. So it's just reducing year on year. Again, because the ideas are with the team, they decide. Does that help, Brendan? I'm just rabbiting on now.
To say it helps would be a massive understatement. That's an absolutely fantastic range of topics you've brought up, and I don't really know where to start. So let me start on the last one. It's actually, when you think about the reductions that you've achieved in rent arrears and rent debt against the background of the cost of living crisis, and it has to be taken into account, that environment, that's really remarkable. But some of the other things that really struck me was that your awareness that actually where the knowledge is about the job is the people who are doing the job. Ali's put something in the chat about maybe if road repair workers who have responsibility for fixing potholes had the freedom and autonomy to be able to say, oh, look, there's a pothole that we've been sent out to fix, and we know we've got to fix it because there's a yellow cross on it, and there's another one alongside it, but there's no yellow cross, so we won't do that one. So we recently did I recently wrote was reminded of work I did years ago in the American city of Indianapolis with road repair workers who, just like your people, when they were asked, what's the equipment like that you use? Are we giving you the right supplies? And the answer was, well, no. The equipment you're giving us is cheap and nasty equipment. It's a false economy. And we know that these particular materials last a lot better than the ones we're using. So learning from the front line about those things is really crucial. And that's what and it seems that creating that opportunity to learn from the front line, but also alongside that, the responsibility on your people to work in a disciplined way, because it's that combination of freedom and responsibility within a framework of standards. That seems to have been the principles that really you've been applying pretty consistently.
100%, and it's what we ask, we expect of everyone. And Frank, asked your question about what happened to the managers.
Yeah.
So obviously in any HR situation, there was a formal restructure, but the position was removed. we found that everyone that we removed left, actually. Also because actually what we were offering in return was investing that money, and this is what we've always done in every team, was to reinvest that into a frontline position. So it would have meant them taking you know, a pay cut effectively, and also doing a job that they probably didn't want to do. And we've also found that you know, at the start of this, there was a bit of turnover, there was a bit of churn. You know, not everyone likes working in this way, because we're asking people to work in a particular way with a particular discipline and holding people to high standards. So this isn't easy. You know, this isn't about great, you know, come into work and do what you want. But it's great if you think that way, and you're rocking and rolling if you think that way, right? But actually, if your attitude is corrosive, if people are waiting to be told what to do, if they're not using their brains, then we won't tolerate that. That's pretty clear as well. You know, this isn't easy. I don't know if Amy can add anything here. I'll be interested to know if she agrees with anything I've said.
Hi there.
No pressure, Amy. No pressure at all.
Wow.
Come
okay. How much trouble am I going to get in? No, I'm joking. Yeah, Sam. I mean, I honestly do agree with everything that you've said. I think it's one thing I would say is, having not worked in this way, in the way that we do before, it's quite a big kind of culture shock when you're talking about sort of turnover and how it doesn't work for everybody. I feel like a lot of people sort of coming into this way of working are a bit taken aback, because you're so used to having been sort of micromanaged in previous roles, or you know, certain things that you're told are expected of you, and you sort of think, hang on a minute, I'd like to think of that for myself. And now in this role, I'm within in the complaints team that Sam was talking about. I get to do that, and it's great. You know, to have a role, it applies to any kind of sector. If you know what you're meant to do, you're given the tools to do it. You can ask for help if you need it. It's up to you to get the job done, and that's great. I really enjoy working that way. Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Rach, I'm going to hand back to you now. I don't know whether you do want to break into smaller groups, but I see that there is a question. You've got yourself a question in the chat that you might want to speak out loud. And I see that Valerie and John have turned on their cameras, and that's often an indication that they're about to chip in. So, so can I hand back to you to facilitate, and you can call me in anytime you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brendan. And it is time for us to move on to questions. I did have one. So I wondered, Sam, when you introduced the new meeting style of everybody being able to contribute, everybody having a voice, did you hear things you'd not expected to hear? Did you hear from people who had always been quiet? How did it impact the team? So just wanted to reflect on that a little, really.
Yeah, I think it really has. I think it has helped with confidence. You know, let's be if you were to shadow and look at one of our team meetings now, I think it would still inevitably feel there are people that don't like talking out loud, that are introverted, that, you know, a kind of a public forum isn't for them, and that's okay, right? You know, so but what it's created is the opportunity for everyone to have their say, and it's also it's a conducive environment to discussion. So people are very happy to challenge, people are very happy to say when things aren't working, and the principle is that they're listened to. That actually we're like, okay, right, that's super. Thank you for that feedback. What can we do to fix it? And it's all what we've also been clear about is that, you know, we want to work with everyone to fix it. This isn't about just me or my colleagues taking this, our coaches taking this. It's about the team working together to find solutions. But I'm astounded all the time by that, just offering up how much it can impact on people, just offering up the opportunity to, you know, I'm not the expert here, you are. What do you think? You know, how should we work? How can we do this? and it is incredible. So I think, yeah, no, it has definitely impacted on the team. I think it definitely has impacted confidence. That's why we've got the staff survey results we have. And interesting, the whole reason I joined the housing team was because they had shocking feedback. We had awful results in, like, I think 2018, 19. Some of the comments were just awful. They've been badly looked after by the organisation. So to see such a the people working in this way, to give them the opportunity to do this has been tremendous. People have been flying, and that's the other interesting thing, actually, that and I would say, actually, I mean, Amy's a good example of this. She leads on a couple of areas of complaints for us and just flies and does super well. Another one of my colleagues, I won't say who, but she was actually, in a traditional sense, was frustrated, causing us a problem. And actually, this way of working gave us the opportunity, rather than just going, no, you've got to do this, you've got to work in this way, to say, okay, maybe we need to talk to her, find out what this is, what the issues are. And it kind of felt, actually, sometimes I feel that way. So it was like talking to somebody, and actually what it turned out was that they just feel so frustrated. So what we did is basically take the lid off, that kind of glass ceiling, if you like, and say, right, okay, go do work in a way that you want to. She's now one of our newest coaches. She's up fabulous because we've just let her fly. So she's kind of like trapped in this box of like, and just being like, I want to do some stuff, I can't, and I'm annoyed. And actually it's channeling that frustration to say, just, okay, great, fly. Think of some ideas, go for it. They might not all work, that's okay. And it's been terrific. It's been absolutely terrific. Yeah. I don't think it's anything, it feels like it's so, obvious. I don't feel like I'm kind of adding much here, but this is yeah.
But you are, Sam, because actually this is not the norm anymore. We've moved so far away from common sense and people being able to use their initiatives, that this is not normal anymore. Even though for those of us who believe in this way of working, it's just all common sense and human and a nice way to work with each other. Actually hearing the impacts for your organisation is really powerful, so thank you for sharing it. I want to open up the questions to other people, so you can raise your hand or give me a wave. Yeah, Valerie, go for it, you're on mute at the moment. There you go, brilliant.
Thank you. It's not perhaps so much a question, but to add to what Sam's been saying and what you've just mentioned, Rachel, I do find it very refreshing to hear you talking along these lines. And you're right, Sam, it does sound almost daft that we're having to talk through these points. My experience is not on the same level as you. It's perhaps on a micro level, because we are a small organisation. But I've come at it from a slightly different perspective, where I've inherited a team of, to all intents and purposes, freelancers. They are freelancers. So the idea has been to foster community-based thinking and a sense of community responsibility, but with freelancers. So nailing a jelly to the wall, basically, on a daily basis. So I do identify with what you're saying, and I'm very interested in what you said about the team meeting dynamics, because I introduced a similar initiative. I got quite tired of the weekly Zoom, having to sort of plow through the weekly Zoom and the agenda that was never quite, never quite being followed in any effective way. So I did ask for team members to be more involved, volunteer to host meetings, bring up initiatives, bring something to the table, bring something to the agenda. it was met with slight sort of incredulity, like, why would we do that? You know, aren't you supposed to tell us what to do? But that was just for the first maybe couple of weeks. So within a month, we started a new momentum, a new feeling. And what I got out of it was almost like free talent spotting. I was able to actually see, like the example you gave of your colleague, I was able to actually see where the talent was. Whereas prior to that, everybody was working in a slightly different mindset of wanting to stay under the radar and not expose their weaknesses. But they needed to realize, well, no, we're not looking to catch you out. Nobody's looking for your weaknesses. We're actually looking for the opposite. We're looking to see where the strengths are and where the talent is. And so now we have slightly different situation where people are having to book themselves in on a calendar, you know, a team calendar, to say when they want to host meetings or what, you know, what special initiative they want to bring for improvements for the future. So, you know, I just want to support you in what you're saying, that even though it sounds very commonsensical and very, you know, as things should be, we are in a situation where we do have to actually state the obvious. We have to go back to basics almost. It does work as long as it's solutions based, not a whinging session, no griping sessions or whinging sessions allowed. We really want you to bring, if you're bringing the problem, then you're also bringing the solution, and that's how we move forward. So thank you for that. It's given me hope.
Thank you, Valerie. That change in mindset to, I'm not just bringing the problem, I'm bringing my suggestion for the solution, is really impactful, isn't it? It can really shift people's mindsets quite quickly and quite dramatically to a very positive, different place. So thank you for sharing your experience of that. Has anybody else got questions or reflections? We were going to break out, but actually we're a small enough group that we can just have a nice conversation, if that works better. Has anybody else got anything they would like to question or ask or reflect? Yes, Ali. You're on mute.
I was bound to do it at some point. Just the one thing I found, particularly when working with clients outside of public world, is that often they're too scared to ask what the team think, or ask what the service users or the clients or the customers think, because they're not sure of the answer they're going to get. So they'll be like, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do a staff satisfaction survey or a customer satisfaction survey. And so therefore they don't open, don't give the space to ask those questions. But I think what I found, and what we've sort of worked to sometimes with those organizations, is a kind of what you said, what we did. So sometimes you ask the questions, you listen, but sometimes you have to be really honest if you can't do perhaps what's been asked or like. But as long as you ask the question and explain why it's not possible now or at this time or for this, then that's fine. People have had a space to be listened to, and you've had a chance to explain why it's not possible. And sometimes it just isn't. Sam mentioned a couple of times why financially it wasn't. It doesn't mean to say it never will be. It just means we can't do it now. So that whole, and like I say, in this organisation I worked with at the time, we very often we did a quarterly what you said, what we did. And it was, this is what you asked for, and this is what we've done. So it might be the first X, brilliant, we've done this, we're pleased to announce we've done this. And then the others would be, we're looking into how we can do this, or we can't do this right now. But just because you're worried about what the answer might be or what you're asked of, doesn't mean to say you shouldn't create that space for people to be listened to and say what it is. And I think that's really important. Like I say, I've heard various that just, no, we don't do that. We know what they're going to say. They're going to ask for a pay rise. Well, if that's what's concerning them and they're going to ask for a pay rise, you need to hear that. It doesn't mean to say, luckily Sam was able within that organisation to find £500,000 to be able to sort it pretty much overnight. But if you can't, you explain why and you try and bring on board understanding of why it's not yet possible. So I just think that, yeah, really important.
Just on that too, if I can.
Yeah, go on, Sam. Yeah,
brilliant.
go.
So two points. First is spot on. So what we do regularly now, particularly with the new teams, so like the neighbourhoods team we've taken on, really regular comms, because there's this view that, you know, oh, I've said it once and it's on the intranet, so you should know it. You know, it's just time and time again. You guys have said bang, 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 you know, so we, you know, getting the equipment sorted, there's like lone working devices, there's a whole load of stuff around their warehouses we need to sort out. You know, it's everything they've said, literally just bang, tick, tick, tick. So every time. And the other thing, Ali, is also that had been before, you know, my time with the housing team, the narrative had been, well, we're never going to get a pay rise, so, you know, the senior bods didn't ask, whatever. Actually, it was very simple to get the bit to do some external market comparisons, to talk to our people and culture team, who were actually very happy to help. So sometimes the organization, you know, people just, there's this kind of misnomer that people think people aren't going to help. It was very easy to do. Surprisingly easy, actually.
Yeah, and actually what we used to do was we'd create a wish list. So we do all the, you know, talk to us, and then there'd be a wish list, and it would sit on the server, and it would be free for you to enter your name, your date, what it was you wanted, and it would be reviewed at regular intervals, you know. And again, it's that just ability to be able to ask and for somebody to be listening. And again, we can't always do those, but that wish list, yeah, every year or whatever, you know, it was yearly there, we'd work through it and we'd go, yeah, we've done this, we're going to look at that, pop it on the wish list, and we'll see how we go with it. And there's nothing wrong with that openness, that people know you're trying to make improvements and you are being listened to.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ali. Anybody else want to make sure people feel that they've had the opportunity to ask Sam questions? So, Mark, welcome back. I spotted you disappeared and you're back.
Rach, so I'd like to follow up another, I didn't want to do so until we gave everybody else an opportunity, but early on in his explanation, Sam referred to the framework and the work we did on the framework of ground rules that you introduced. And you mentioned that that was particularly important. And we certainly find that that's true, because a lot of the organizations we work with start with the idea, an understandable idea, and even in some ways a good one, that, look, all we've really got to do is create conditions for our frontline people to work with more responsibility. They'll come up with the solutions, etc. And that is true, as everything you've said is demonstrated. But organizationally, there also needs to be an integrity. There are standards. There is an ethos. There are requirements about how resources are used. It's one thing to allow much more authority for expenditure to be exercised where that expenditure needs to be made. But it's another thing but there obviously have to be standards about that everybody signs up to. So could you say a little bit more about the importance of the framework that you developed and what kind of elements you have within it that you found useful?
Yeah, so I think part of it was the development of the framework, the discussion with the team about what should be in here, what's not, you know, what is your job? And that really led, like I said, to some fascinating discussions. And actually, naively, I went into that thinking, well, this will take an hour, because it's quite clear, you know, it's for that team, it was right. Okay, some of it was about, you know, taking rent payments, some of it was talking, you know, being available, talking to customers, helping with some kind of tenancy management stuff, blah, blah, blah. We thought it was very simple, and it definitely wasn't, because it enables you to see that everyone has a slightly different perspective of the job and what the external, you know, the external environment is. So it was focusing on exactly what, you know, that team's remit was. The other thing was around what behaviors we expect from people. So, you know, things like making sure that we record data accurately, that you're putting down things that are factual, that, you know, so the behaviors and ways of working we expect of folk. And then also the mandated, the kind of, like I said, the tax we have to pay. So we're a regulated sector. So from the housing ombudsman that Amy absolutely loves, the social housing regulator, the frameworks that we have to work within of that, you know, the Human Rights Act, we have to pay particular attention to with vulnerabilities. So it enabled us to do that. Then what we rolled out was those same discussions with every team. And we've got 4 teams, effectively, 4 kind of sub-teams in Newtide that all have different disciplines. And we've got a 1-pager that summarizes each of those streams. So, for new starters, for current staff, they can go to those and see, look, this is where we fit in, this is how we work. I think we've also been clear, there are grey areas. So whilst the framework is important, there's also a transfer of information between the teams. That's also important. So they're in constant communication so that we don't end up having silos. So yeah, I think it was and remains a very supportive document for us. And that's why we've created something called a neighbourhood standard, which is almost the same thing, which is what we'll do in the neighbourhoods team, how we'll work, what we expect. And it also enables us to publish that, to say to staff, you know, this is what we'll do, and to customers. And going further than that, Brendan, we actually created something which is like our offer, or what you can expect for tenants that join us as well. So we can be really clear, look, this is what you get when you sign up. Because we've never done that before. There was no, we were doing that for staff, but there was no overview of that for customers. So we have I think it's 2 or 3 pages that says, look, when you join, when you in a way that you would join a gym, you'd get an overview of what you're getting. We never did that. So actually, it's a really simple overview of what you can expect from us, what our service is. So that's really helped. Yeah.
It's really interesting, because one of the features of what you've just described is that you've elaborated norms of behavior and standards that are defining, if you like, they're defining the cultural characteristics of the organization, but they're norms. And we've worked with some organizations. I remember going into an NHS organization where we started, where we needed to look at their rule book, and nobody could actually pick it up. But nobody had picked it up for years anyway. They had dust on it because, of course, nobody really paid any attention to it. But what we found in it was, every time there was something gone wrong in this organization, some new rule was brought in, which had the purpose of not solving any problems or helping people to do their jobs more effectively within the standards that were expected. But actually were all to do with covering backs and so on. So one of my favorites was, there was a rule for how you should open a window, because the organization didn't want to be sued if somebody damaged their back opening a window, which is understandable. But as Frank's just said in the chat, all of these rules are really about exceptions, and what the framework of standards that in our blended learning program we support organizations with is how to think about what the purpose of your organization is and how that purpose is carried out in practice. In other words, what's the work and what are the normative standards, the norms that are required in there. So it's very interesting to hear you talk about its importance. But a follow-up question is also, and maybe you're going to get to this, is do you find that now those norms have become embedded in the day-to-day practice of the organization, so that nobody really needs to keep referring to it as a document? It's more to do with just the way we do things around here.
Yeah, it is. We revisit. It gets revisited occasionally, but yeah, there is absolute clarity on how we work and that discipline. And again, that's some stuff. I had a fascinating session. I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys or not, but I went to visit Timpson. I've been trying to get in the door for ages in Timpson. Frank, that's one for the list. They're brilliant, absolutely fabulous. I went to visit them in Manchester, and again, the discipline that came out of that, the way of working, the absolute focus on customer, on they've got they're clear, they don't have rules, but they've got 2 rules. So, you know, put the money in the till, look the part. And other than that, it's down to staff. And it's that way, I think it's that that mantra. I do think though, in all of this, and this is why it's so interesting, and Frank, maybe you'll have a view here, being from the Netherlands. I don't know, but it's the way that certainly our sector is moving at the moment is it's quite, we're being told quite a lot of what to do, right? And that means that there's a lot of nervousness around the regulator, around the ombudsman. There's a lot of publicity around when things go wrong. So actually, whilst, you know, we want to create an environment internally and shelter staff from that and say it's okay, publicly, there are emails, there are letters from government, from central government figures being sent out, kind of a name and shame feeling. So what we've also got to battle with here, Brendan, this is one of the biggest things I think is that, and this is why we're not as pure as I'd like us to be, it's about how brave we want to be. And I think that takes great courage, because we've got a regulator and an ombudsman that have a particular view of how things are done, which means that actually our tolerance for risk is very small. So when we come in for an inspection, for example, we have to show and we have to evidence, and there's this feeling that now, particularly when it comes to things like complaints and the ombudsman, that are this name and shame stuff, that if we haven't written it down, it didn't happen. So it creates this environment where you've got to write everything down, that creates rules, and so it's a really careful at the moment for the housing sector anyway, a careful line to tread. And some of this is for good reason, right? So we had, from 2017, Grenfell, we had the awful tragic death of Awar Bishak because of damp and mold in a property. So all of this is for good reason, but the problem is, I think what it's leading to is actually an environment where people are creating more rules and processes because of the illusion of control, rather than saying, actually, this way of working allows more control and better ways and better results for customers. So it's a very interesting time for us as a sector about that.
Yes, but I mean, very interesting. And one of the indices of change that I noticed when we were speaking before, Sam, was that because you support your people to resolve complaints. I mean, you call them complaints. Sometimes it'll just be saying, look, we need some repair in the building. Something's happened. So it's not so much a complaint, perhaps, as just an alert to you that something needs to be done. But because you've given them authority to deal with that themselves right away without passing up one silo and coming down another silo, you've reduced the complaint, the average complaint time dramatically, as far as
it was. Well, that's 3 things. For better people. Okay, so that I think the whole team, hence why Amy's here. So we had better people, more focus on customer outcomes, looking at the data, better systems to support. So we've actually just introduced a whole new system, because we've got, I think, the average person in the organization deals with about 22 systems on a day. Bonkers. You can't do that. So we're moving to one single version of the truth. Our solution is to go with Dynamics, Microsoft, but people can do what they want. But again, it's just getting rid of the dross, so automating where we can to allow people to become more human, right? The whole links back to the housing human thing. That's 2. I can't remember the others, but effectively, yes, we've by allowing people to do that, by resourcing, that's it. That was number 3, maybe more people. 2 years ago, it took us 80 days to turn around a complaint. Now we're doing it in 8 days. So our complaint management is fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. So we have absolute clarity of how long it takes, what the complaints are, what the themes are, what the trends are, what the issues are, and so we can learn from them and sort it out. And that's a different way of working.
And of course, that brings also some savings, because you're not having to deal with so much failure demand In other words, you know, people calling you all the time saying, look, I reported this complaint a month ago, nothing's happened. And you've got to have people answering the phone to that. So I mean, there's the cost of not dealing with things when they need to be dealt with by enabling people to do what's needed when it's not needed. That's often a hidden cost that organizations don't attribute correctly.
Yeah, and it's so we surfaced when we took the complaints team as well. We surfaced. We used to say, we've closed that complaint. Here it is, bang, we resolved it, shut, done, right? And it didn't show up any metrics. What we know is, and what we surfaced was that yes, you've sent a letter, but in the letter you've said we will, I don't know, fix your window in a month's time when we can get there. That's still open in our book. It's not fixed until it's actually done and resolved. So we track that as well. And what it's allowed us to see is we need to get our repairs way better, way better, which is why now we've got a whole project in our repairs team. We've put in a whole new piece of software to kind of sort out and automate some of our, just to kind of the back office stuff, our repairs. There's a focus on repairs teams. And again, hopefully working in a more kind of empowered way to allow teams more time. I won't go into repairs now. That's a different kettle of fish. That's a for another day maybe. But yeah, another one. While I remember it, Frank, just quickly, while I've got you, I was at a meeting. This is totally irrelevant, but two things. I'd love to know your blog or where it is. I don't know if you can post it or if you're happy to share that. I'd love to know. And also I was at a meeting with a company called Rebel Energy on Friday, who fabulous, about 200 strong, new entrants into the UK energy market, proper hot-like self-managing. So it'd be worthwhile you're catching up with them. Definitely, I can put you in contact with someone if it's useful. But yeah, very interesting pilot, because again, they're from the ground up, right? So they've got the ability and they're scaling quick. So might be worth you having a call with them anyway.
Definitely.
Totally irrelevant, but chucked it in there.
Might I add something? What you just said, you were talking about the issues you're facing with government and like the regulatory constraints. And I recently spoke with a Dutch company. It's a software company, and they came up with their own system of doing their finances. I think it was a friend of the owner. They came up with a huge kind of Excel sheet where they were able to have one source of truth of the data, which you mentioned, but also that it was kind of real time. But then there was the Dutch tax authority that came, and there's accountancy as well. And they came, well, you have to deliver the numbers in a certain format, and they were unable to do it. So they had to add an extra layer on top of it to able to comply with the Dutch tax law, which is kind of,
bonkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to bring Mark in here. Mark, you've put a question in the chat, and that your question hasn't been asked as yet. So do you want to put that to Sam?
Yeah, it's we're looking at, so we work with young people, youth and community, and in terms of the service, so I'm director of the service, so we've got quite a good bit of freedom, and we're looking at working with Public World to go down the whole that kind of teal route. So what advice would you give to starting off? So we're very we're kind of young people focused, but we're used to working. Our method is probably, even though we work as a charity, is very similar to a local authority way of working in terms of youth club, youth work. But we want to start the whole kind of process. Have you got any advice that you would give for us starting off? So we know a lot of it's hearts and minds and putting that across. But any kind of advice starting off the journey would be useful.
Yeah, the stuff that's worked for us, again, and I can only speak for what we've done is, and it comes back to that macro micro thing, but knowing exactly, first of all, I would say that your priorities get to know, and if you know everyone already, that's great, but go and have one-to-ones with everyone. Go and meet, have one set of questions that you and your colleagues or whoever can go, maybe Natalie, but go and have the same conversations with everyone, ask them the same things: what's working, what's not working, get a feel of how people are, what's good, and what they think the vision should be, what do they think the service is, what should they be providing, and then use all of that, I think, to combine into a there'll be an element of, what the service is, right, that you provide. I'm sure you'll be either did you say it's YMCA? Is there YMCA? Yeah, so there'll be contractual points or principles around what you've got to deliver. So creating some kind of a overview or vision of what you should be doing, right? That means that you'll know some of the problems, you'll know where you want to get to, some of that you can fix quickly. I think at that point, personally, that's when I'd get the Bren dog in and start thinking about, okay, how can we work? How can we utilize these skills and this advice? But I would spend time getting to know that, if you haven't already, really, a good half an hour with everyone. What's working, what's not working, what should we do? That then gives you that kind of macro micro level, and also in there data, right? And I can't speak for what that needs to be, but you also need to know what actually is happening, because sometimes there's that third element, which is your view. You have the team's view, and also what's the data telling you, what is actually happening, whether be it service users demand, I don't know, or start introducing that so you can start collecting that, because that's damn important. I think it's that, and then, like I say, then get the Bremeister General in to rip stuff up from a kind of a self-management perspective. Does that help, Mark? Maybe not.
That does, Sam. That's really helpful in terms of having the data. So making sure we've got the data, as well as what I think, what the team thinks, and what actually is happening on the ground. That's useful. Yeah.
There was a really interesting study. Maybe you couldn't write it, where people were asked, right, how they use an office building, and everyone went in, and they literally had GPS bands on, because they were redoing the office. This is Oxford University study. If I can find it, I'll dig it out. And they basically said to everyone, "We're tracking you. So for the next month, just record how you use in the office." So they tracked everyone. So they had the data, what floor, where they were. They then asked everybody, what have your movements been over the last 2 weeks, month? And everyone sort of wrote it down. There was like zero statistical correlation between what people said and what they did. So I think there's also an important point about the data, which is really knowing what's happening. That's really empowering. But you'll have to know also, people will have ideas and will know what's going on as well. So it's a combination of all of that, I think. It's really important.
Brilliant. Sam, Mark, I want to bring you together at some point in conversation, because Mark is also going to be working in a very autonomous way in his team, Sam, in the same way that you are, but within an organisation that is still operating as a hierarchical operation, and therefore that sort of balance between those two things can create at times challenge. And I think that might be useful for you both to have a conversation around that. I don't know if you'd give Mark any tips on the off the cuff on that, Sam, but
don't wait for permission. Keep going, and keep so I'm very happy if you want to have a call, just for kind of, you don't get ground down by it. Honestly, that's the biggest thing I can say, is keep in contact with Rachel, Brendan, get some people that are doing this stuff, and then get some of your energy back and say, oh, no, okay, this is actually a good way of work. We can do this. Yeah, that's fine. People can actually, because that's why I was talking to Rebel Energy on Friday. This is why I kind of read. This is why I do stuff like this, because you need this, right? This tops up those batteries to say, no, we can do it. There is a better way. That's the biggest thing I can say, basically.
Sounds like an opportunity for a community cuppa to me. And also what you've just said about breaking down the isolation and connecting with each other and peer-to-peer learning is very much the purpose of our Humanity at the Heart online community of practice, which Rachel can let anybody who doesn't know about it here know about, so you can join it and just make your make your peer-to-peer collaborations directly. Sorry, Sam.
Just to touch on John's question, he said, have you changed the measures that you used to track and control people? Interesting. No. So I'm very lucky. Our background, our chief exec, whilst not believing that's unfair, but not working in this way, we've always used sort of things like he was heavily influenced by Deming, system syncing, the Vanguard method, whatever you want to call it. So we've always placed a huge impetus on good data, not on telling people what to do. So actually, we've already got the suite of metrics and measures we use is very factual. It's very much on, so our rent, how we're doing, what's the data, going down to the minutiae, turnaround of properties, however you want to go down to, complaints, etc. So they've always been publicly available for the team to use, certainly not to use to hit people over the head. I hope that helps, but yeah, just open data,
so important,
basically.
isn't it? Not to beat people over the head with the data, but allow it to create conversation and an understanding of what you might need to work on next. Absolutely. We have come to the end, would you believe? When we just before we started, Sam and Brendan were not sure whether we needed quite an hour and a half, but that hour and a half has gone mighty fast from my perspective. I don't know about the rest of you. So we're coming to a close. I will be following up with everybody. I will invite you to the next community cuppa where Katie Kelly will be joining us. So we'll have that session on the 18th of July. And I'll also ensure that you've all got an invitation to the community if you haven't already joined it. But it's just to end this call to say a huge thank you, Sam, for coming and joining us and sharing your story, and to Amy for you sharing your experience and how it feels to be part of that team. We really valued the conversation today.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, and thanks for engaging. I think it'd be super. And hopefully, we'll kind of stay in contact, whether it be the community cup or whatever. So look forward to seeing some faces again.
Thanks a million, Sam.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your Wednesday.